Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. For anyone new here, my name is Jay, and today we're going to be talking about the rut, all things rut. I know this video is probably a little bit late for especially the phase of the rut that we're in right now, but if you stay tuned towards the end, I'm going to give a bonus phase of the rut that I think it's really overlooked and it can be used in the coming weeks here. But let's dive on in. I'm going to go over each phase of the rut and then how I hunt that particular phase. Now, let's get one thing out of the way first and foremost. The rut begins in your area the exact same time every single year. There's a lot of rut watches and rut reports out there online, and I'm not the biggest fan of those because what one person could be seeing on a particular piece of land or property compared to what someone else is seeing, depending on, land management, how they're hunting, public land versus private land, it could be really misleading. So it's just easier to say, and it's been proven time and time again, that does come into estrus the exact same time every single year. Let's begin with the first phase of the rut and my personal favorite, the pre-rut. Since I'm in Pennsylvania, southwestern Pennsylvania, that occurs more October 25th, 26th-ish. You can move those dates around slightly, give it a day before or a day after. That phase is when a very small number of does, just a couple, are coming into estrus, and the bucks, especially the mature bucks, know it, and they start moving a lot more during daylight. More in the morning than anything is what I've noticed over the years. So, since they're moving a lot more in the morning, how do I hunt the pre-rut? That's when I'm getting into my usually first morning sits of the year. Usually, that's when I end up filling my buck tag on one of those bucks that I've been watching during the summer and then fall, and then he's finally starting to make a pattern in the morning. That's when you can have real good success on what I call a core buck, a buck that calls this area that you're hunting home. He's not somewhere else just passing through the area. That would be more of a non-core buck. But the pre-rut is a great opportunity to hunt a core buck. That lasts about a week to 9 days, something like that. Phase number 2 we'll get into, fast forward those number of days after the pre-rut, is the rut lockdown. This is arguably my least favorite time to hunt. It drives me insane every year. Rut lockdown is, especially if you're after one of those core mature bucks, he is more than likely locked on a doe somewhere, staying real close to her, like within 10 yards, 5 yards, or even a couple feet. He's bedding with her, just waiting for her to come into estrus. And he's not moving much, she's not moving much, and if you're not within that 100-yard window of him, sometimes you have to be even closer, you just won't see him. And calling at him doesn't do a thing. He's just so locked on that doe that he's not caring about anything else. So the rut lockdown can be really frustrating, and it's, can give the people the perception, especially if they're not in that window, that, the rut's slowed down, or it's not happening, or, something like that. But it's happening, it's just you're not in that window. And it's funny though, the past 2 years I've ended up filling my buck tag during the rut lockdown, but it's also driven me nuts, especially this year, of seeing the buck that I hit in the pre-rut. He showed back up again in the rut lockdown, and he was probably about 50 yards, but he was locked on this doe. I grunted at him, I did everything, every call I had in my disposal, I threw at him. He didn't even bat an eyelash at me. He was just walking with this doe. He could care less. And especially where I usually hunt, my morning stands, they're 50 yards. That's a bit of a far shot for deer anyway, and it's really thick, so that wasn't happening. But for rut lockdown, when I like to hunt, mostly focused on mornings, but I'm sitting a little bit longer towards, noon, 1 o'clock, somewhere around there. Because those bucks can be just filtering those does along, and they're still moving more towards those hours. But I usually don't hunt evenings too often. I just don't end up seeing that much movement in the evenings, and I think it's because that bucks are, again, kind of like in the pre-rut, they're on their feet and moving so much in the morning. They kind of not necessarily lay up for the evening, but they're just not as active and moving around as much during the evening. So that's the rut lockdown. That lasts about 4 to 5 days, give or take. Let's go into the third phase, the peak rut, which is probably everyone's favorite phase, because that's when all the bucks are just everywhere, especially the mature bucks. They've bred one doe already during the lockdown. Now they're branching out to further away areas, different properties and such. The peak rut lasts about a week, maybe a little bit more, give or take a couple days. And during that time, I'm more or less hunting any chance I can, sitting in the morning, in the midday, in the evening. As far as all day sits go, I don't consider myself doing all day sits. To me, an all day sit is you're sitting in the same stand from from dawn to dusk. I just don't do that. Most of my stands are so specific to a certain time of day. So if I sit in this morning stand, it'll be really good in the morning, but then once you get closer to the evening, the movement and activity around that stand start to diminish. So the stand that I really like to focus on is those in-between stands. So a stand in like a funnel type area, or a stand in between two big bedding areas, or I'll just try to use my tactics that I use during the most of the season, then sit more towards bedding in the morning. In the evening, get down, move towards a stand that would be closer to a food source. So that's the peak rut. It's a good time to shoot a non-core buck. Some buck doesn't call your land home, and he's moving from another place to yours. Phase number 4, the post rut. This is a time when a lot of does have been bred already, and when those mature bucks especially, they don't want to give up. They don't think it's over, and they want to get that one last doe and whatnot. A lot of times moving can be rough during the post rut, because if you think about it, these bucks have been on their feet and moving so much over the past couple weeks, and they're run down, so they may not be moving as much. What I like to do, if I still have a buck tag in my pocket for the post rut, is focus on food source movement, because that's more than likely where the does are going to be. Those does have been run around so much, they're trying to get extra feeding time in. So I focus more on evening during the post rut, sitting not necessarily on the food source. If I have a small food plot or hunting plot, I'll sit on that, but focusing on movement that would end up towards a food source. Now, the bonus phase, if you stuck around for this long, which I appreciate, I think this gets overlooked so much. The second rut. A lot of people don't even think a second rut exists, but it absolutely exists. Second rut occurs about a week and a half-ish after the post rut. So here in southwestern Pennsylvania, that'll be more like mid next week. So I'd say like a week after Thanksgiving here. More up north, northern areas like in Maine, Minnesota, UP and Michigan. That's more like this coming weekend. It's gonna start happening. If I were to be hunting the second rut with a buck tag, I usually don't, but I'd say out of the last 8 years, I've hunted the second rut with a buck tag once, I think. what I'd like to focus on is bedding areas. I'm shifting more towards the morning, my morning hunting again, and focusing on those bedding areas because I'm hoping a buck is going to come searching for, scent checking the bedding areas for a doe. And then I'm extra focusing on those evening food source movements because, again, we're starting to get into the colder winter months now, and those does are going to want to be feeding. So those bucks know that, so they're going to be checking around those food plots and food sources that you may have, seeing what's about. I hope that's helpful to you guys. I know it's coming out late. The rut is basically already over. We're in the post-rut phase now, and that's definitely showing up on my trail cams. Bucks are not moving much. You see them cruising in the evenings towards food sources, especially now with how cold it is. But think about that second rut, because a lot of gun seasons are going to start coming in right now, or if already, and that could be an opportunity to fill a buck tag on an unpressured food source, especially. Thanks for watching, guys. Hit that like button and hit the subscribe button too, especially if this is content yins appreciate. And I will see yins in the next one. Bye.